How do we have peace? How do we end violence in America? Well, we end it. That's how we do it. Not with words, not with escalation. We end violence in America with an equal and opposite reaction, a mass action with leverage. Let's face what we're dealing with. We have a president who's using another horrific college campus shooting that so many of our kids this time were actually forced to watch on their phones because, as Premi Sterlin pointed out, we don't even get a play button anymore. And it happened on the same day as another school shooting. The same day, more bombs, U.S. made, dropped on civilians in Palestine. And our president, he's not toning it down. He's all out blaming the left and the liberals. Says right-wing extremists aren't bad. They're just scared of crime. His senior deputy, whatever, just called Democrats a domestic terror organization. And right-wing influencers are calling for war. And this so-called spokesperson for modern Christianity, his second favorite television network, just called for giving homeless people lethal injections if they refuse services. What services? Who knows, since they're cutting all of them. And his ex-best friend, the richest man in the world, about to be a trillionaire, told the UK White Nationalist March that whites need to fight back or we're going to die. So where do we think this is all heading? Not toward releasing the Epstein files, not when they're doubling down on this divide and conquer con as old as time, which is really too bad because united, we could fix probably everything. But this is a tough case because the right is eating its own tail, ignoring all the major Democrats and most of the actual left who've clearly condemned a horrific shooting of somebody while he was in the middle of talking to kids at a college. This young man who opposed gun control because he thought you needed guns everywhere to protect your other rights, who was literally in the middle of denying the statistics on our epidemic of school shootings, in the middle of questioning whether those numbers were actually inflated by gang violence when he was shot and killed at a school. A man who openly called for the return of public executions and suggested that young people should be initiated into life by watching them because that would deter crime. This young man who was himself victimized by that very kind of heinous violence that he was in support of if it was directed at other people under different conditions. So for all those people who supported Charlie, I understand why this is totally confusing, because you must think that everybody thinks like you. But family, most of us are traumatized by every aspect of it because we disagree with everything that Charlie said, practically everything. So let's clear this up. Have you heard of Noam Chomsky? He's the most famous leftist intellectual in the country. And this is what he said about political violence. Quote, wrong in principle, tactically self-destructive. When we move to the arena of violence, the most brutal guys win. That's the worst outcome. So use the opportunity for education and exposure, not to give a gift to the hard right while attacking fundamental principles of freedom of speech. End quote. That's the left. In other words, if that guy that they're saying is the shooter, if he was the guy, that's not our guy. There's nothing progressive about murder, which we understand given the ongoing genocide, the bombing of imaginary drug dealers in international waters. This word murder appears to be becoming blurry to people, but it's not to us. So let's pull it into focus for each other. That kid who speaks in subculture memes, that's not doing what we're doing, which is calling for universal health care, an end to wars, an end to genocide, an end to capital punishment. He's not calling for a new Green Deal, an economic Bill of Rights, and he's certainly not calling for gun control. And so while we're on this topic, there really is no such thing as the left when you use it as a phrase to cover all the people who aren't in this white nationalist party whose number one concern is maintaining a white majority wherever you may happen to be, whether in the UK or the UK's offspring who literally invaded Australia or the Americas. So how do we all overcome this cacophony of BS that's coming from these screaming hordes of White Walkers? What is the equal and opposite reaction to violence that cannot be misinterpreted? Let us be firmly planted on the round earth, a society where people are so freaked out, so afraid that they really think they need to carry guns to make it through the day. That's not a stable society. It's not secure. It has no law and order. It's not civilized. It's not even the Wild West. Even in the glory days of Tombstone, you had to check your gun before coming into town. The Wild West had more gun laws than the U.S. does today, and those laws were posted all over the place. They said the carrying of firearms strictly prohibited. And that Constitution, if we really want to reference it, it never suggested guns should be carried individually for citizens to be able to take up arms against a government, a tyrannical federal government, which the 2A crowd could obviously care less about. Seems to be that's what they want. But that Nixon-appointed former conservative Chief Justice, he called that whole framing one of the greatest pieces of fraud, I repeat the word fraud, on the American public by special interest groups that I've ever seen in my lifetime. Every reliable historian will tell you what should be common sense if you think about it, that the Second Amendment, which was created by our government, was there to make sure that local militias were ready to crush rebellions, slave, native, other foreign colonial invaders, and most of all, anti-tax rebellions. Doesn't that make a little bit more sense? And why it says right there in Article 1, Section 8 of our Constitution that Congress is given the power to provide for calling forth the militia to suppress insurrections and invasions, end quote, because that is what it is. And that's what it was used for by George Washington, who called up 10,000 militia members to crush an anti-tax rebellion. That's what the Second Amendment's been until a few decades ago. And so for the rest of us at this point, trying to half-step and stumble and talk out the sides of our mouth into civility, just begging, please, can we have maybe like a red flag law or a restriction on open carry, but just for people with a mental health disorder? Why do you think we call Democrats weak? Because that's confusing. It's ineffective. We don't know what you're talking about. What is it that we want here? We want a stable, a safe, a modern, advanced, and peaceful civil society with law and order. Real law and order, which means guns can't be on the table as a solution to problems. That's gangland. And it's totally unsustainable as a strategy, locally and globally. Let's actually be clear for once and morally consistent. If you think that you need to carry a weapon of war in civil society, you've lost faith in both civility and society. If you reasonably think that you need a gun to protect yourself against imminent attack from criminals or enemy actors, you are living in a radical extremist condition. And as a society, whether that fear is real or totally made up, this is an emergency. So we've been acting like frogs, just relaxing in a pot on a hot stove, not doing too much. But now the water is at a rolling boil, which is why every reasonable person, including the left, including liberals, neoliberals, Democrats, independents, Republicans who actually stand with Christ, should unite in universal school strikes and walkouts, because our schools are not safe. And we should have two clear demands. Number one, a universal ban of weapons of war on American soil for everybody. And that goes for law enforcement. And number two, a total moratorium on weapons of war sold abroad. Every school, from elementary to university, we walk out. We're not participating. We're not enabling this nightmare anymore. Is that going to be difficult for parents of young children who can't afford to miss work, can't afford childcare? Yeah, of course. It's going to be nearly impossible by design. Because we don't have health care, childcare, parental leave, meaningful vacation time like every other wealthy nation on earth, because all our tax money gets used for those weapons of war. We have no other choice. Our scientists, the ones that we want to keep in this country, the ones with atomic expertise, they have their doomsday clock set at 89 seconds to midnight for two reasons. Number one, they're concerned that our War Department is going to cause a nuclear catastrophe. Or number two, they think we're on the verge of suffering a climate collapse caused by that same War Department, the leading contributor to it. So we need to cut off its funding. Its funding for genocide, its holy crusade against the second largest religion in the world, which is just a branch of one of the three of our Abrahamic family tree. How are we standing by while a single United States representative is allowed to publicly sign an idiotic, juvenile message on a bomb headed to kill civilians, headed to kill children, committing flagrant, illegal political violence overseas? And then we're going to act shocked when some impressionable juvenile writes the same kind of childish note on a bullet casing here at home? This is not complicated. But the longer we wait to take real action, the more difficult it's going to be. As we speak, they're dumping more and more money into that vigilante secret police force whose job is ethnic cleansing. They're getting more money than most other countries' military budgets. So where do we think this is heading? As parents and allies of parents with real family values, we need to connect and coordinate childcare between us, share responsibility, and take some action with moral clarity and consistently nationwide. Because as long as we allow weapons of war to be everywhere, nobody is safe anywhere. And this is our national security threat, the number one killer of our children here and abroad. So we should have zero tolerance for this. Either we strike with two clear demands, no war weapons on American soil or sold abroad, or we can make this complicated. And this administration is going to get to use this latest national horror, ignoring all the other horrors, to just declare more violence, more escalation, more war. And our tepid response is going to be muddy and confused and compromised, fractured, and insincere. So if we want to end violence, if we want peace on earth, if we want peace at home, let's walk the walk and walk out of our schools, which aren't safe anymore, with two clear demands, and protect our children, which are all children, and protect our people, which are all people. And from there it grows. Let's start organizing.